Hi guys, tonight we're slipping back into the deep green dawn of the Americas to meet corn before it is corn, before golden fields, before tortillas steaming on clay griddles, before harvest songs, before anyone can imagine that this quiet plant will help build civilizations. What if one of history's greatest crops began as a thin, stubborn grass hiding among the riverbanks and warm hills of ancient Mexico? What if the food that will one day feed cities, armies, villages, livestock, factories, and midnight snackers begins with something so small you might step over it without noticing around you? The air is soft and damp. Insects murmur in the brush. A breeze brushes your skin with the smell of wet earth and crushed leaves. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from and what your local time is. Now, dim the lights. You're walking into a landscape long before written history, where the hills rise gently under a warm sky, and the grasses sway with a sleepy confidence, as if they know something you do not. You're somewhere in what is now southern Mexico, thousands of years before cities lift their temples into the sun. The land is alive with small sounds. Dry seed heads tick softly against each other. Birds stir in the trees. The soil under your feet is uneven, crumbly in some places, slick in others where rainwater has gathered. The scent is green and mineral, a little smoky from some distant fire, a little sweet from ripening fruit hidden in the brush. Here, till you meet the ancestor of corn, not corn as you know it, not tall stalks with heavy ears wrapped in husks like presents from the field. This is teosinte, a wild grass with narrow leaves, hard little seed cases, and a body so unlike modern maize that, for a long time, even experts found the relationship almost suspicious. You look at it and think, really, this is the grandparent of corn, this wiry little thing. History, apparently, enjoys starting with a punchline. Teosinte does not offer itself easily. Its seeds are small, few, and wrapped in tough shells. You cannot simply peel back a husk and find rows of soft kernels. Instead, you have to work. You have to gather, crack, chew, test, remember. The plant asks for patience before it gives anything back. And yet, somewhere in the long hush of human attention, people begin to notice it. They notice which plants have larger seed heads. They notice which seeds are easier to free. They notice which stalks grow near camps, near paths, near places where people drop scraps and ash. They notice that some grasses return changed, slightly more generous than their relatives. Not dramatically, of course. Ancient plants do not wake up one morning wearing a crown. They change in whispers. The mainstream historical fact at the centre of this quiet beginning is clear enough. Maize was domesticated from teosinte in Mesoamerica, probably in the region of modern Mexico, over many generations of selection by indigenous farmers. The process began thousands of years ago, likely by around 9,000 years before the present. Though the exact timing and pace are still debated, you're not watching one inventor discover corn. You're watching countless hands, meals, seasons, and decisions accumulate into a crop. That is less tidy than a single genius moment, but much more beautiful. You crouch beside a patch of wild grass. The leaves are cool against your fingers, their edges faintly sharp. Dust clings to your knees. A woman nearby breaks open a seed casing with a stone, then tastes what is inside. A child watches, bored in the sacred way children are bored when history is happening too slowly. Someone laughs. Someone coughs in the smoke. A dog, not especially impressed by agriculture, noses at the ground. No one calls this domestication. No one says, "Let us begin a botanical revolution." They are trying to eat. They are trying to keep families alive through dry seasons and uncertain weather. They are learning which plants return after disturbance, which grow better where ashes enrich the ground, which tolerate being tended, moved, favoured. The work is practical, intimate, and repetitive. It is not romantic in the moment. It is fingers aching, stones scraping, baskets filling too slowly, and someone wondering whether gathering nuts might have been the better plan today. Still, the plant changes over generations. People choose seeds from plants that hold together at harvest instead of scattering themselves wildly. That matters. A wild plant wants to spread its seeds and be left alone. Thank you very much. A domesticated plant becomes, in a sense, less independent. It begins to rely on people to plant it. This is one of those strange bargains in history, where both sides become dependent. Humans shape maize, and maize shapes humans right back. The hard seed cases soften, the edible part grows larger, more kernels appear, the arrangement of the plant begins to shift. What was once a small, branching grass slowly becomes a stalk bearing ears. Not quickly, not cleanly, not in a neat little agricultural montage. The change takes time, and time here feels almost liquid. Seasons fold into seasons. Rains come, rains fail. Seeds are saved, lost, stolen by animals, traded between families, blessed, forgotten in baskets, dropped near hearths, planted again. You feel the atmosphere thickening with possibility. A warm wind moves over the hillside where it carries the smell of damp leaves, smoke, human sweat, and ground seeds being toasted on hot stone. You hear the gentle scrape of tools. You hear low voices, not dramatic, just daily. The oldest histories often sound like chores. And then there is the deliciously quirky tidbit, because even corn, noble builder of civilizations, has a slightly weird family story. Teosinte kernels can pop when heated, not like the fluffy theatre popcorn you know, buried under suspiciously yellow butter flavouring. But still, some ancient grasses had the capacity to burst open under heat. Imagine someone tossing hard little seeds near a fire and hearing tiny snaps in the darkness. Not a grand feast, perhaps, but enough to make people look twice. A snack-sized miracle. The first person to notice may have reacted with wonder, or with the ancient equivalent of, well, that was unexpected. You sit near a small fire as evening comes. The light turns amber, smoke curls upward, softening the edges of the trees. The air cools, touching your arms. People pass roasted seeds in a small bowl. They are chewy, nutty, not especially luxurious, but comforting. The taste is earthy. You understand, for a moment, that domestication is not only science, it is appetite, curiosity, memory, trust. Yet the story is not simple. Historians and archaeobotanists still argue whether maize domestication began in one main region and spread outward, or whether related experiments with teosinte happened across multiple communities before one lineage became dominant. Genetic research has clarified much, but not every shadow has lifted. Archaeological remains are fragile. Ancient pollen drifts away. Tiny plant fragments decay in the soil. Human choices leave marks, yes, but time enjoys smudging the evidence. So you walk through uncertainty as much as through grass. This is important for the sleepy historian in you. The past is not a locked cabinet full of labelled facts. It is more like a field at dusk. You can see shapes, paths, and movement. Some things stand clear, others blur into shadow. Scholars measure starch grains on ancient tools, examine microscopic plant remains, compare DNA, study cave deposits, and trace how maize travelled into new regions. Each discovery lights another small lamp. Still, the full human story remains partly hidden, and maybe that is fitting. Corn begins as a relationship too gradual for any one witness to understand completely. You pass a shallow shelter where people grind seeds with stone. The rhythm is slow and steady. Hush, scrape, hush, scrape. The sound could almost rock you to sleep. Nearby, baskets are lined with leaves. A few selected seed heads are set aside, not eaten. That decision is powerful. To save a seed is to imagine a future. It says tomorrow matters. Next season matters. Children not yet grown matter. Even in a world of uncertainty, someone makes a small promise to time. The stored seeds are dry against your palm, hard and light. They do not look like destiny. They look like pebbles, like fragments, like something easy to lose. But within them sits a pattern that people are beginning to favour, larger, softer, more useful, more willing to remain attached to the cob, more suited to the human hand. As centuries pass, the plant becomes increasingly strange by wild standards. It loses some ability to reproduce without help. Its seeds become enclosed in ways that make human planting necessary. This should be a terrible strategy in the wild, but in the human world it is brilliant. Maize moves where people move. It receives cleared ground, loosened soil, protection from competing plants, sometimes water, sometimes ceremony. In exchange, it offers food that can be dried, stored, ground, boiled, roasted, and transformed. You can almost feel the first outlines of later history forming, though no city yet rises around you. A plant that stores well changes the rhythm of fear. Food no longer has to be found fresh every day. A harvest can become a buffer against hunger. A basket can become a calendar. A seed can become a debt, a gift, a marriage tie, an offering, a reason to stay. But for now, everything remains small, a clearing, a family, a patch of managed grass. The Americas are not yet covered in maize fields. There are no great granaries, no imperial tribute lists, no market stalls stacked with ears in red, blue, white, and gold. There is only the slow intimacy of experiment. You notice how careful people are without being delicate. They burn brush to open space. They dig with simple tools. They press seeds into loosened soil. Their hands smell of ash and sap. Their feet know the slope of the land. They watch the sky with the nervous wisdom of people who cannot outsource weather. When clouds gather, conversations change. When rain comes, the leaves shine. When drought lingers, even the insects sound rude. Gentle sarcasm has its place here, because nature is not a sweet old grandmother handing out snacks. Nature is moody. One season generous, the next season dramatic. Humans survive by paying attention. They test, compare, and remember. They argue, probably. Someone insists seeds from the lower patch are better. Someone else thinks the upper slope produces stronger plants. Someone's uncle has opinions. Agriculture has never lacked opinions. As the plant changes, so do the stories around it. Even before grand myths are carved, painted, and spoken in formal ritual, you can sense how food invites meaning. A seed placed in the dark earth disappears, then returns as green life. A dry kernel becomes meal. Meal becomes dough. Dough becomes warmth in the stomach. It is not hard to see why later cultures will treat maize as sacred. The miracle is daily, and daily miracles are the easiest to overlook. Night settles more fully now. The grasses darken. The fire glows red at its heart. You hear the faint clicking of insects, the softer breathing of sleepers, the distant call of something hunting under the trees. The ground holds the day's warmth beneath you. Smoke scents your hair. Somewhere in the darkness, saved seeds rest in a basket, waiting for hands that may plant them when the rains return. You understand that the history of corn does not begin with abundance. It begins with attention, with hunger, yes, but also with tenderness toward possibility. It begins when people look at an unpromising grass and, instead of ignoring it, keep wondering, what if this one? What if these seeds? What if we plant them closer to home? What if we save the best? A crop is being born not in a single moment, but in 1,000 quiet choices. The wild grass does not know it yet, and the people cannot see the full road ahead. But the bargain has begun in the warm dark of ancient Mesoamerica, among smoke, stone, damp soil, and patient hands. Teosint is slowly becoming maize, and maize, in its own silent way, is beginning to become history. You step into a morning where the world is beginning to stay in one place. Mist hangs low over a clearing, pale and soft, while the first light touches roofs made of branches, reeds, and packed earth. The air smells of wood smoke, damp clay, and yesterday's cooked grain. Somewhere nearby, a child cries briefly, then quiets. A dog scratches at fleas. A stone tool taps against another stone with the patient rhythm of work that has no need to hurry, because the day is long and the fields are waiting. The people around you are not simply wandering from food source to food source anymore. Not always, not everywhere. Life remains flexible, because ancient people are sensible enough not to put all their hopes into one basket, especially if that basket can be eaten by mice. They still hunt. They still gather wild fruits, roots, seeds, and nuts. They still know the tracks of deer, the ripening times of berries, the places where useful plants grow without being asked. But now, near their homes, maize is becoming part of the daily pattern. You feel this shift in the layout of the settlement. Homes sit close enough for voices to travel between them. Hearths are blackened from many fires. Grinding stones rest in familiar spots, smoothed by repeated use. Storage pits are dug into the ground and lined with care. Some are covered with mats, stones, or packed earth to keep out damp and hungry little visitors. The village has the smell of staying smoke in the roof thatch, sweat in sleeping mats, cooked food in clay, and soil turned again and again by human hands. This is one of the great mainstream facts of early farming life in the Americas as maize became more productive and dependable. It helped support more settled communities, especially when combined with other crops such as beans, squash, chili peppers, and local wild foods. It did not instantly create villages everywhere. History is rarely that tidy, and frankly, anyone promising an instant revolution is probably selling something. But over generations, maize farming made it easier for some communities to remain near fields, tend crops, store harvests, and build social routines around planting and harvest. You walk past a small plot where young maize plants rise in green rows, though not the ruler-straight rows of modern farms. These plants grow in a living mixture. Squash vines spread wide across the ground, their leaves rough under your fingertips. Beans twist upward, searching for support. The soil is soft where digging sticks have opened it. Ash from burned brush has darkened patches of earth. You can smell leaf mold, smoke, and the faint sourness of composting plants. The field is not separate from life. It is part of life. People pass through it while talking, carrying baskets, watching clouds, checking leaves for damage. A woman bends to pull weeds, her hands moving with practiced calm. An older man presses a seed into the ground and covers it with his heel. A child is told not to trample the seedlings, and immediately walks far too close to them, because children have also been historically consistent. The soundscape is gentle but busy. Birds call from the tree line. Maize leaves whisper against one another. A baby is rocked in a woven sling. Someone laughs at a joke you do not understand. From one house comes the dull, steady song of grinding stone over stone, grain becoming meal. That sound matters. It is domestic, ordinary, almost hypnotic. It is also labour. Every soft cake, every porridge, every warm mouthful begins with hands, shoulders, knees, and time. You sit near the grinding stone and watch kernels transformed into coarse meal. The stone feels cool at first touch, then gritty. Fine dust clings to fingers. The smell is warm and faintly sweet when the grain is toasted. A pot simmers nearby, releasing steam into the dim interior of the home. Smoke escapes through the roof imperfectly, which is to say, it also lingers in everyone's eyes. Ancient domestic life may be beautiful from a distance, but up close it often comes with coughing. The village is learning storage, and storage changes everything. A harvest that can be dried and kept becomes more than food. It becomes planning, it becomes security, temptation, obligation, and occasional drama. Stored maize can feed a family through lean weeks. It can be shared with relatives. It can be offered in ceremony. It can be traded. It can also become a reason for envy, theft, or argument. Once people invest labour into fields and store the results, questions begin to grow beside the crops. Who planted this patch? Who may harvest from it? Who controls the baskets? Who decides when stored grain is opened? No one needs a written law code for these questions to matter. They appear in daily gestures, a grandmother deciding how much meal to give visiting kin, a household setting aside seed for planting instead of eating it during hunger, a young couple receiving grain as part of forming a new home, a respected elder asking everyone to contribute to a communal feast. You see social life thickening around food. This is where maize becomes not only a plant, but a quiet organizer of human relationships. At the edge of the settlement, smoke rises from a patch of newly cleared land. The smell is sharper there, full of charred wood and hot ash. People use fire carefully, though not always gently, to open growing spaces. Burned vegetation releases nutrients into the soil for a time. The cleared ground is easier to plant, but fields need rest. Weeds return. Soil changes. Farmers learn by watching which places recover and which grow tired. There is no modern laboratory here, yet there is experiment everywhere. You notice how knowledge is carried in bodies. A farmer feels soil texture between fingers. A cook knows by smell when grain is toasted enough. A child learns seed selection by watching which ears are saved. Weather wisdom lives in glances toward cloud shapes, insect behaviour, wind direction, the thickness of heat before rain. This knowledge is not written down, but it is not casual. It is precise, accumulated, and sometimes guarded. A quirky little tidbit hums at the edge of this world. Some early communities may have treated especially unusual maize ears, odd colours, strange shapes, or rare growth patterns as meaningful signs rather than mere accidents. A cob with kernels arranged oddly, or a plant that behaved differently from its neighbours, could attract attention. Not necessarily because anyone thought it was magical in the storybook sense, but because farming cultures often notice irregularity. A strange plant might be saved, joked about, feared, admired, or used in ritual. Humans see patterns everywhere. Give us a weird vegetable and we will form an opinion. You enter a house where several ears of maize hang from the rafters, drying in the smoky air. Their kernels are smaller and harder than the sweet corn you might imagine, but they are precious. Some are pale, some darker, some mottled. They click softly when touched. The husks are papery against your palm. Below them, a family shares a meal from a clay bowl. The food is simple grain, perhaps squash, perhaps gathered greens, maybe meat if the hunting has been kind. Steam warms your face. The taste is earthy, fill-in slightly smoky from the hearth. Eating together has its own politics. Who receives the first serving? Who eats quickly because work waits? Who eats last after feeding others? In many early farming communities, food preparation likely shaped gendered labour, household authority, and social memory, although the details varied widely. Grinding grain is repetitive and demanding. Planting and harvesting require coordination. Storage requires trust. This is not merely a cosy village scene. It is a system of effort, negotiation, and habit. Scholars still debate how quickly maize became a staple rather than a supplement in different regions. In some places, people adopted maize slowly, keeping it as one food among many for centuries. In others, it eventually became central to diet and identity. The evidence comes from plant remains, Ancient tools, human bones, settlement patterns, and the chemical signatures of diet. But the pace was uneven. People did not simply see maize and abandon every older food tradition like overly excited shoppers in a new market. They adapted it to local needs, climates, tastes, and risks. That unevenness makes the story more human. You walk beyond the houses to where food is being sorted under shade. Baskets sit in a semicircle, hand-separate kernels, seeds, fibres, shells, and dried herbs. The work smells dusty and vegetal. A breeze lifts bits of husk. There is conversation, a soft web of gossip, instruction, complaint, teasing. Someone has planted too late. Someone's storage pit let in water. Someone claims their cousin's field always grows better because the soil there is favoured by spirits, or because the cousin works harder, which is much less poetic and therefore probably less popular as an explanation. Nearby, a small ritual is taking shape. Nothing grand. No towering temple. Just a careful placing of food. A murmur of words. Perhaps a gesture toward the earth. Rain. Ancestors. Or forces not easily named. Agriculture invites ritual because it depends on so much beyond control. You can plant well and still lose everything to drought, flood, pests, or disease. Ceremony does not replace labour. It sits beside labour, giving form to hope and fear. You feel the uncertainty in the air before rain. Leaves turn their undersides to the wind. The light changes. People pause and look upward. A drop lands on your wrist, cool and sudden. Then another. The smell of dry soil opening to rain rises around you, rich and almost sweet. Maize leaves tremble as water begins to fall. Rain is blessing, but also a reminder. Farming creates dependence on timing. Seeds need moisture, but not too much. Fields need sun, but not scorching heat. Stored grain needs dryness. People learn to live by seasonal rhythms, and those rhythms shape stories. Work, rest, migration, marriage, and ceremony. A community with fields must decide when to plant. A community with stores must decide how much to save. A community with neighbours must decide when to share and when to protect. As the rain deepens, people carry baskets indoors. The roofs patter softly. Smoke thickens under the shelter, and the world becomes close and dim. You sit in the warm interior, listening to water run from the eaves. A child sleeps against someone's lap. Kernels dry above the hearth. Tools lean against the wall. Outside, the young maize drinks. In this settled hush, you can sense a new kind of time forming, not the immediate time of hunger alone, but the longer time of fields, seed selection, storage, inheritance, and return. The village is not fixed forever. People may still move when soil tires or trouble comes, but maize has given them a reason to come back to the same ground, to remember particular plots, to bury food beneath floors, to teach children the names of planting places. The crop is becoming a calendar you can eat, and as evening lowers over the village, the rain softens to a whisper. The smell of wet earth mingles with smoke and warm grain. Somewhere in the dark, a storage pit holds its quiet treasure. Somewhere in the field, roots grip the loosened soil. You lie near the hearth, feeling the packed floor firm beneath your shoulder, hearing the slow breathing of the household, the drip of water outside, the last scrape of stone against stone. Life here is not easy. It is not yet a world of great cities or vast fields. It is small, smoky, careful, and full of decisions. But in the glow of the hearth, beside baskets of saved seed and bowls of thick maize food, you can feel the Americas changing one household at a time. The wild abundance of the old landscape has not disappeared. It has been joined by something new, a patient partnership between people, plants, memory, and the ground beneath their feet. You enter a heavier kind of green. The air is warmer here, thick enough to feel almost woven. Moisture gathers on your skin as soon as you step beneath the trees, and every leaf seems to hold a private reservoir of rain. The Gulf lowlands breathe around you with the scent of mud, river water, crushed vegetation, and smoke drifting from cooking fires. Insects sing in layers, some high and thin, some buzzing low near your ears, somewhere unseen. A bird cries out sharply, then vanishes into the canopy as if embarrassed by its own drama. This is the world of the Olmec, one of the earliest complex societies of Mesoamerica, flourishing in the tropical lowlands near the Gulf Coast of what is now southern Mexico. Their major centers, including San Lorenzo and later La Venta, rose long before the famous cities of the classic Maya. The ground beneath your feet is soft, but the society growing from it is anything but simple. Here, among rivers, swamps, fertile ridges, and dense forest, maize helps nourish a world of ceremonial centers, skilled craftspeople, long-distance exchange, and stone monuments so large they still seem to ask who had the energy for all this in such humidity. You follow a path raised slightly above the wet ground. It is packed with clay, slick at the edges, and pressed by many bare feet. To one side you glimpse cultivated patches where maize grows in openings cleared from the forest. The stalks rise among other useful plants, not alone like a modern field stretching toward the horizon, but woven into a practical landscape of gardens, orchards, gathered foods, and managed spaces. The leaves brush against one another with a dry whisper that feels oddly delicate in such damp air. A farmer bends near the base of the plant, checking the soil. His hands are dark with mud. A woven basket hangs from his shoulder. The smell of the field is sharp and fertile, with rotting leaves, wet earth, and the green bitterness of broken stems. Nearby, smoke from a small fire keeps insects away, though only in the most optimistic sense. The mosquitoes remain committed to their work. History, unfortunately, includes them too. Maize matters here, but it does not stand alone. People fish the rivers, gather wild fruits, hunt deer and smaller animals, tend useful trees, and use the watery landscape with great skill. Yet maize provides a dependable, storable food that can support larger communities and repeated gatherings. It can be dried, carried, ground, cooked, and offered. In a humid world where preservation is never effortless, any food that can be managed through care and knowledge becomes important. You approach a settlement where the daily and the sacred sit close together. Houses of perishable materials cluster near open spaces. Smoke rises from hearths. Dogs wander with the shameless confidence of animals who know exactly where scraps fall. You hear the thud of wood, the murmur of voices, the slap of wet clay being shaped, and from farther away, the dull rhythm of labour around earthworks. The atmosphere is both village-like and ceremonial, ordinary and intense at the same time. Then the ground opens into a larger space, and you feel the scale shift. Ahead stands a colossal stone head, its face broad, solemn, and calm in a way that makes you lower your voice without meaning to. The features are carved with careful lips, heavy lids, a helmet-like head covering. The stone surface holds heat where sun reaches it, and damp coolness in shaded grooves. It smells faintly of rain and mineral dust. You stand close enough to see tool marks, subtle planes, and the softened edges left by age. These monuments are one of the best-known facts about the Olmec world. Enormous basalt heads were carved and transported, sometimes over long distances, likely representing rulers or important figures. Their size suggests organised labour, planning, leadership, and the ability to feed workers who are not spending every hour finding their own dinner. Maize does not carve stone, of course. People carve stone, but crops that can be stored and redistributed help make such projects imaginable. You imagine workers moving basalt from distant sources. The stone is heavy beyond casual understanding. It must be dragged, rolled, floated, levered, cursed politely or impolitely, and guided through difficult terrain. Someone has to organise food, someone has to direct labour, someone has to decide the monument is worth the sweat. Around the work area, meals are cooked in large quantities. Maize dough is shaped, perhaps steamed or baked, perhaps served with beans, squash, fish, or chili. The smell of hot food rises into the damp air, comforting and practical. Power often smells like dinner. A leader who can gather labour must also gather trust, fear, obligation, ritual authority, or some very persuasive combination of all four. Maize enters that system quietly. Stored grain can feed workers, host ceremonies, support specialists, and mark generosity. A public feast can turn agricultural abundance into political memory. You eat with someone important, and later you remember who provided the food. Very convenient for them, naturally. You move toward a ceremonial platform where offerings are being arranged. The ground is carefully shaped, not random. Coloured clays, polished stones, jade objects, figurines, and food may all have roles in rituals whose full meanings remain partly out of reach. The air is smoky with resin and damp wood. A low chant moves through the group, more felt than heard. Maize kernels may be present as food, symbol, or offering, and even when not visible, the agricultural cycle hums beneath the ceremony like a slow drum beat. Olmec religious imagery often includes powerful beings with blended human and animal qualities. You see carved faces with downturned mouths, cleft heads, and features that later scholars have connected, carefully and sometimes controversially, with rain, fertility, rulership, and maize. The imagery is strange, beautiful, and not eager to explain itself, which is rude, but very on brand for ancient symbolism. A quirky tidbit waits in these green shadows. Some Olmec-style figurines and carvings show elongated heads or unusual cranial shapes, and later observers have wondered whether elite beauty, identity, or sacred status could be linked to deliberate head shaping in infancy. This practice existed in several ancient societies, including parts of Mesoamerica, though its meaning varied. So, while maize is changing bodies through diet, culture may also be shaping bodies through ideals of appearance. Ancient people were not less interested in style than modern people. They simply had fewer mirrors and much heavier jewellery. You pass a craft area where artisans work with stone, shell, bone, and clay. Their fingers are steady. A small jade object glows green in the low light, smooth as water. Jade likely travelled through exchange networks, connecting distant landscapes to Olmec centres. So did obsidian, pigments, shells, and ideas. Maize, in a different way, also travels through relationships. Seeds move with families, gifts, marriages, trade, and migration. A crop is never only a crop once people begin carrying it as part of who they are. The smell of cooking draws you toward a household. Inside, the room is dim and warm. Smoke slips through gaps in the roof. A woman grinds maize on a stone surface. Her movements slow and strong. The sound is soft, repeated, almost like breathing. A pot bubbles nearby. Steam carries the scent of grain and herbs. Your hands touch a woven mat, slightly rough, still holding the day's humidity. The meal is not luxurious, but it is sustaining. It is the kind of food that makes monument building, ritual gathering, child raising, and mosquito surviving slightly more plausible. Outside, rain begins suddenly, as it often does in the tropics. It drums on leaves and roofs, turning dust to paste. Water runs along the edges of paths. The maize leaves bend and shine. People continue working under shelters because rain is not an event here so much as a frequent personality. You feel the coolness of it on your face, then the warm damp returning as soon as the shower eases. The scholarly uncertainty deepens around you. Researchers still debate how central maize was to the Olmec diet at different times and places. Some evidence suggests maize was important, but not always dominant in the earliest phases. Aquatic foods, wild resources, and other crops likely remain significant. The exact balance is difficult to reconstruct because tropical conditions are unkind to preservation. Plant remains decay. Wooden tools vanish. Meals leave only hints. Scientists examine pollen, phytoliths, starch grains, residues, settlement patterns, and human remains, trying to hear a whisper through thousands of years of rain. This uncertainty is not a weakness in the story. It is part of its texture. You're walking through a world where evidence survives unevenly, like patches of sunlight under forest canopy. A carved head may remain massive and visible, while the hands that cooked the meals have disappeared entirely. Stone speaks loudly. Food speaks softly. But without food, the stone would never have moved. You climb a low platform and look out across the settlement. The landscape is not a city in the later sense of streets and blocks, but it is organised, meaningful, and alive with coordination. Raised areas, plazas, drainage, monuments, and households create a social map. People gather for rituals, trade, decisions, obligations, and perhaps spectacle. Children run near spaces where adults are being very serious, which is another universal historical truth. Someone always has to tell children not to climb on important things, in the distance. Cultivated clearings gleam between trees. Maize stalks stand among the damp greenery, their tassels catching pale light. You can hear frogs calling from wet places. The air tastes faintly of smoke. A drum sounds, low and measured. Or perhaps it is a wooden tool striking earth. In this world, agriculture and ceremony are not separate chapters of life. They are braided together. Corn's role here is not simply to fill bowls. It helps support gatherings where leaders display power. It gives substance to offerings. It joins the rhythm of rain, fertility, labour, and renewal. It feeds artisans whose hands polish jade, workers who shape clay platforms, travellers who carry goods, families who teach children where to plant and when to harvest. It may also carry sacred meaning, though the exact forms of that meaning remain partly hidden behind symbols no one has fully translated. The day lowers toward evening, and the whole lowland seems to exhale. Mist begins to lift from wet ground. Smoke thickens around houses. The colossal head watches with its heavy-lidded calm, as if it has seen every ambition humans can invent and is politely unimpressed. A bowl of maize food warms your hands. Its surface steams in the fading light. You taste earth, smoke, and a faint sweetness. Around you, the Olmec world settles into night. Frogs pulse in the dark. Insects continue their tiny, relentless orchestra. Rainwater drips from thatch. Somewhere, stored maize rests above the damp, protected as carefully as people know how. Somewhere, a carver dreams in stone. Somewhere, a farmer listens to the weather. The crop has entered a larger stage now. Not a silent patch beside a home, but a force moving through ceremony, labour, status, and memory. In the humid Gulf lowlands, maize does not stand alone. It joins river, forest, stone, smoke, and human imagination. It feeds bodies, but it also helps feed the possibility of public life, of monument, of hierarchy, of ritual splendour rising from mud and rain. And in the soft darkness, while the carved faces stare over wet earth and the fields drink the last silver light, you feel how quietly a grain can support a world that looks anything but quiet. You walk into a clearing where the morning mist rests lightly over the maize, and the world feels measured by green. The field is not a lonely stretch of crop. It is a milpa, a living garden of relationships. Maize stalks rise tall and straight, their leaves long and blade-like, trembling when the breeze passes through. Beans curl upward along the stalks, finding support without needing anyone to build them a ladder, which is considerate of them. Squash vines spread across the ground, their broad leaves shading the soil and holding moisture against the heat. chili plants, herbs, fruit trees, and useful wild plants may grow nearby, making the space feel less like a farm in the modern sense, and more like a carefully encouraged piece of forest edge. You are in the Maya world, where maize is not merely food, it is breath, story, labour, calendar, and identity. Across the lowlands and highlands, in villages and great cities, Maya communities build daily life around the planting, tending, harvesting, grinding, cooking, and honouring of the maize. The exact patterns vary from place to place, because the Maya world is wide and diverse, filled with different languages, landscapes, and histories. But maize runs through it like a quiet golden thread. The air smells of damp earth, crushed leaves, wood smoke, and the faint sweetness of ripening crops. Your feet press into soil softened by recent rain. A line of ants crosses the path with the confidence of tiny officials. Birds call from the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a conch shell or trumpet gives a low, carrying sound, and the field workers pause just long enough to listen before returning to their tasks. A farmer checks the maize leaves for signs of pests. His fingers are quick and gentle. Nearby, another person uses a digging stick to loosen soil around the base of a plant. A child carries a small gourd of water and looks extremely proud of this responsibility, as one should. The milpa is a place of effort, but also knowledge. Every plant has a role. Maize gives structure. Beans enrich the soil and provide protein. Squash covers the ground, discouraging weeds and helping retain moisture. This mixed system, often described as the Three Sisters in many indigenous farming traditions, is one of the great agricultural achievements of the Americas. You can hear the field breathing. Leaves scrape softly. Insects hum. The air warms as the sun climbs. Sweat gathers under your collar. The surface of a maize leaf feels smooth in the middle and sharp along the edge, just enough to remind you that even dinner has boundaries. The mainstream fact here is unmistakable for the ancient Maya. Maize became a central staple crop and a major symbol of life and creation. It fed households, supported cities, shaped seasonal labour, and appeared in mythology, art, ritual, and royal display. Maya rulers associated themselves with fertility and cosmic order, and maize imagery often appeared in scenes of renewal, abundance, and sacred authority. When you look closely at carvings and painted vessels, you find maize not only in bowls but in crowns, gods, stories, and bodies. You leave the field and follow a path toward a settlement. Houses stand on low platforms, their walls made from perishable materials, their roofs thatched and fragrant in the sun. Smoke rises from hearths. Dogs nose through scraps. Turkeys cluck with the severe self-importance turkeys have apparently always possessed. Near one home, a woman kneels at a grinding stone, pressing cooked maize into mesa. The sound is slow and steady, stone against stone, soft as a lullaby, but born from labour. The maize has likely been treated with an alkaline process using lime or ash, a technique that makes nutrients more available and helps create dough with the right texture. This process, known today as nixtamalization, is one of those brilliant food technologies that can seem ordinary because it happens in kitchens rather than palaces. It improves flavour, softens kernels, and helps prevent nutritional problems when maize becomes a major food. The ancient kitchen, once again, quietly saves civilization while monuments take the applause. You sit near the hearth. The heat warms your shins. Smoke stings your eyes a little. The smell of mesa is comforting, warm, mineral, slightly sweet. Hands pat dough into thin rounds. They are placed on a hot clay griddle, where they puff slightly and release steam. The first bite is soft, earthy, and alive with a faint taste of fire. Outside, someone laughs. Inside, a child waits with the intense focus of a person who believes the next tortilla is obviously theirs. Food here is not separate from time. Maya calendars track cycles of days, rituals, agriculture, and celestial movements with astonishing sophistication. Planting and harvest depend on rain, seasons, and local knowledge. Priests, farmers, rulers, and households all live under cycles that repeat but never feel simple. The rains must come, the dry season must be endured, the fields must be cleared, burned, planted, weeded, watched, and thanked. You move toward a market space where the day has grown busier. Mats are spread on the ground. People trade maize, beans, squash, cacao, salt, obsidian blades, woven cloth, pottery, feathers, and perhaps gossip, which is the oldest portable commodity. The air is full of smells: roasted maize, chili, sweat, clay dust, smoke, and wet fibre. You hear bargaining, footsteps, children calling, baskets shifting, and the clack of goods being set down. Maize appears in many forms: dried kernels in baskets, dough wrapped in leaves, thick drinks, tamales steaming gently, gruels for the young, the old, the tired, the ceremonial. It is food that travels between field and body in many disguises. It can be humble and sacred at once, as which is a useful talent. A tortilla can feed a worker at dawn. A maize offering can speak to gods by dusk. The sacred story deepens when you encounter the idea that humans themselves are made from maize. In later recorded Maya tradition, especially in the Quiche text known as the Popol Vuh, the successful human beings are formed from maize dough after earlier attempts fail. Whether every Maya community told the story in exactly that form is another question. And no, ancient cultures did not operate like a single streaming platform with synchronized releases, but the broader connection between maize and human substance is powerful. The food that sustains the body becomes the material of human identity. You look at a painted vessel where a youthful maize deity emerges with elegant beauty, often shown with a long head and flowing forms suggesting corn silk or leaves. The imagery is graceful, almost dreamlike. Maize is not only a crop in this art, it is youth, renewal, sprouting life, and the return of abundance from the dark earth. Seeds go below, plants rise, people die, children are born. The cycle is agricultural, cosmic, and deeply personal. A quirky tidbit waits in the shape of beauty itself. Some Maya elites practiced intentional head shaping, and the elongated form could echo ideals of nobility, refinement, or even maize-like elegance. In some artistic traditions, a sloping forehead and long head may visually resonate with the shape of an ear of corn. So yes, in a world where maize is sacred, even elite fashion may have leaned toward looking a little more like the crop of life. Ancient status culture had commitment. You have to give it that. You climb the steps of a temple plaza as afternoon light turns bright and sharp. The stone under your bare feet feels hot. The city around you may be one of many Maya centers, each with its own history, alliances, rivalries, rulers, and rituals. Temples rise above plazas. Stelae stand carved with dates and royal images. Painted walls, carved lintels, and hieroglyphs record names, events, offerings, victories, and sacred performances. Beneath the grandeur, fields and farmers sustain the whole glittering machine. This is where the scholarly uncertainty enters like a soft shadow across the plaza. Researchers continue to debate how Maya populations in different regions balanced maize farming with forest management, raised fields, terraces, household gardens, trade, and wild resources. Some areas may have relied on intensive agricultural systems far more complex than simple slash-and-burn farming. Others use shifting cultivation alongside tree crops and managed landscapes. The old picture of Maya farmers simply clearing forest until everything collapsed is much too blunt. The truth is more varied, more regional, and more interesting. Even the so-called collapse of many classic Maya cities is still debated. Drought, warfare, political fragmentation, environmental stress, changing trade routes, and social unrest may all have played roles, with different causes in different places. Historians and archaeologists still argue whether maize agriculture was a source of resilience, vulnerability, or both. A crop can feed a city, but dependence on harvests can also expose it to climate stress and political pressure. Maize gives generously, but it does not cancel uncertainty. You stand near a reservoir where water reflects the sky. The surface smells faintly of mud and algae. Water management is crucial here. Cities need reservoirs, channels, aguadas, or other systems to store and direct water, especially through dry months. A ruler who can promise rain or manage water gains power. A farmer who knows the soil gains survival. A community that stores grain gains time. Toward evening, the market quiets. Smoke turns blue in the low light. The heat softens. Families return to houses where maize is soaked, ground, wrapped, steamed, toasted, stirred, and shared. You hear the pat-pat of dough shaped by hand. You hear the crackle of fire. You smell chili roasting until it catches in the throat. The air is thick with dinner and memory. In one house, an elder tells a story while children eat. The words move gently, carried by firelight. They speak of earth, rain, ancestors, gods, and people whose bodies belong to maize because maize belongs to them. The children may not understand every layer, but they understand the food in their hands. Sacred things are easiest to believe when they are warm. You step outside beneath a sky filling with stars. The dark outlines of maize plants stand beyond the houses, leaves moving in the night breeze. The field is both ordinary and holy. It waits for rain, it waits for hands, it waits for songs, tools, insects, mistakes, and harvest. The Maya world gives maize a language larger than hunger. It becomes a way to think about being human. You feel that as the night cools around you, as the smell of smoke settles into your clothing, as the last tortilla disappears from a shared plate. The crop has become body, story, city, and ceremony. In every kernel there is labour, in every meal, a season, in every field, a conversation between people and the living earth. And under the quiet stars, with a milper whispering beyond the homes, you understand why maize could be imagined not just as something people eat, but as something people are. You follow the maize northward, not as a single marching army of plants, but as a patient traveller carried in baskets, stories, trade routes, and human memory. The path bends away from the deep tropical forests and into lands where the sky opens wider. The air grows drier. Sunlight falls harder on stone and sand. Wind moves across scrub plants with a faint rattling sound, and dust lifts around your ankles like a sleepy animal disturbed from its nap. The smell is different here: warm rock, dry grass, pinon smoke, sage, and the clean mineral scent that rises before desert rain. You are entering the vast movement of maize across North America. It does not arrive everywhere at once. It does not mean the same thing to every community. In some places, it is welcomed and transformed. In others, it remains one food among many. In still others, it changes settlement, ceremony, architecture, trade, and the very rhythm of survival. Corn is adaptable, but people are the true engineers of its journey. The mainstream fact is this maize spread from Mesoamerica into what is now the American Southwest by thousands of years ago, and from there, over long periods, it reached many regions of North America, including the Great Plains, the eastern woodlands, and the Mississippi Valley. As it moved, communities selected varieties suited to local climates, shorter growing seasons, different soils, and different patterns of rainfall. A seed that thrives in one valley may sulk dramatically in another, because plants, like people, have preferences. You stand at the edge of a small field in the southwest. The maize here may be shorter, tougher, and more drought-aware than its relatives in wetter lands. The plants rise from small planting basins where precious moisture can gather. Their leaves curl slightly under the heat. A farmer moves carefully between them, checking each one as if greeting a quiet neighbour. The ground is sandy and warm through the soles of your feet. When you touch the soil, it falls loosely from your fingers. Water is the central question here. Rain may come in sudden bursts, then vanish for weeks. Streams may run seasonally. Springs matter. Floodplains matter. Terraces and check dams matter. People learn to plant where runoff gathers, where snowmelt can be guided, where a wash might briefly become a ribbon of life. Farming in dry country is not a casual hobby. It is attention sharpened into technique. You hear the soft scrape of a digging stick. You smell smoke from a distant hearth. Somewhere, corn is being roasted, its scent faintly sweet under the dry wind. A woman carries a basket lined with woven fibre, the texture rough and beautiful. Children help bring water, though some of it is spilled with the ancient confidence of children doing their best, and also not doing their best. In settlements across the southwest, maize becomes part of a broader food world that includes beans, squash, wild seeds, cactus fruit, game, and gathered plants. Communities store grain in pits, rooms, or jars, protecting it from moisture, insects, and rodents. This is never simple. Rodents are basically tiny historians of food storage, always eager to investigate the archive. You walk toward a cliff dwelling tucked beneath a stone overhang. The rock face glows red and gold in the afternoon light. Cool shadow gathers beneath the ledge. The walls are made of stone and mortar, fitted into the curve of the cliff. The air smells of dust, dry stone, and old smoke. You place your hand against a wall, and it feels cool, slightly gritty, holding the day differently than the open ground. Here, ancestral pueblo and worlds, maize helps support villages, ritual rooms, storage systems, and long-distance connections. It is ground into meal, shaped into food, and woven into ceremony. Corn pollen, soft and yellow, becomes especially meaningful in many pueblo traditions, associated with blessing, life, and prayer. A plant has travelled into a new landscape and become not only useful, but deeply rooted in spiritual life. Yet nothing about this adaptation is easy. Droughts come, fields fail, communities move, houses are rebuilt elsewhere, social ties stretch across mesas, canyons, and river valleys. Trade carries turquoise, shells, macaw feathers, pottery, and ideas. Maize moves within these webs of exchange, but it also forces decisions. Where can you plant? How much can you store? How many mouths can this land support when rain becomes stingy? A quirky tidbit appears in the desert light. Some ancient southwestern maize varieties were so small-eared and colourful that a modern shopper might mistake them for decoration rather than dinner. Tiny cobs, blue kernels, red kernels, speckled kernels, each one shaped by generations of selection. Blue corn, still important in the region today, carries both flavour and identity. It becomes meal, bread, porridge, and ceremonial material. Small does not mean simple. Sometimes a little ear of corn contains centuries of human genius, which is more than can be said for many oversized things. You continue eastward, and the landscape changes again. Dry plateaus give way to grasslands, river valleys, oak forests, and eventually the broad eastern woodlands. The air thickens with humidity, leaves rustle overhead. You smell wet bark, leaf litter, river mud, and smoke. The sound of cicadas rises in summer heat like a shimmering wall. Maize enters these regions slowly and unevenly. Many communities already have rich food systems based on nuts, seeds, fish, shellfish, deer, waterfowl, wild plants. An earlier cultivated crop such as sumpweed, goosefoot, maygrass, and sunflower. This older Eastern agricultural complex is important, and it deserves its quiet applause. Corn does not arrive to an empty stage. It enters a crowded kitchen. At first, maize may be a novelty, a useful addition, or a crop grown in small amounts. Over time, In many places, it becomes more central. Its rise often coincides with changes in settlement patterns, population growth, storage, and social complexity. But the transition is not identical everywhere. Some groups embrace it deeply, others balance it with older foods. Food history is rarely a clean replacement. It is more like a crowded dinner table where someone keeps bringing another dish. You walk along a riverbank where gardens spread near rich alluvial soil. The ground is dark and damp. Maize grows taller here, nourished by summer rains. Beans climb the stalks. Squash sprawls between mounds. Sunflowers turn their faces toward the light. The field hums with bees. Leaves brush your arms, leaving faint streaks of moisture. A fish trap sits in the shallows nearby, reminding you that farming and fishing can belong to the same world. People work in groups, talking as they weed and harvest. Their words mix with the river's slow movement. Maize ears are gathered into baskets and carried toward the settlement, where they will be dried, stored, ground, boiled, roasted, and added to stews. Some kernels are saved carefully for planting. Seed selection becomes a quiet form of power. Choose the right seed, and your descendants may eat. Choose poorly, and the next season will have comments. In the eastern woodland, maize also becomes part of diplomacy and hospitality. Food given to visitors carries meaning. A feast can mark alliance, mourning, harvest, adoption, ceremony, or negotiation. To feed someone is never just to fill them. It places them inside a relationship, even if only briefly. Corn in a bowl can say welcome. Remember, obey, forgive, celebrate, or please stop being difficult. The scholarly uncertainty here is especially interesting. Archaeologists still debate exactly how maize spread through different parts of North America, whether primarily through migration, exchange, intermarriage, imitation, or some mixture of all these. Seeds can travel without people moving permanently. People can move and bring seeds with them. A farming technique can be borrowed while older traditions remain in place. The evidence includes charred kernels, pollen, residues on pottery, settlement remains, and chemical traces in human bones. But the pattern is regional, messy, and alive with local choice. You pause in a woodland village where storage pits lie near houses. The pits are lined and covered, hidden partly below the earth. The smell of stored maize is dry and faintly sweet, with a dusty warmth. A basket is opened, and kernels pour like little stones into a clay vessel. The sound is crisp, almost musical. Nearby, a pot simmers with maize, beans, and squash. The steam carrying a rich scent into the evening. The atmosphere feels settled but alert. Fields require defense from animals, weather, and sometimes people. Deer enjoy crops. Birds enjoy crops. Insects enjoy crops. Humans, inconveniently, also enjoy crops. Agriculture can support bigger communities, but it can also make wealth more visible and territory more important. A stored harvest is a blessing, and also a thing someone else might want. Across the plains, maize follows river corridors and village farming traditions, especially along places where soil and water cooperate. Not all plains peoples become farmers in the same way, and many continue to rely heavily on bison, hunting, gathering and trade. In some regions, women's farming and men's hunting combine into seasonal economies of great flexibility. Maize can be planted in river bottoms, harvested, cached, and used alongside dried meat and wild plants. Here again, the crop adapts by joining, not replacing, older patterns. You feel the wind change as you stand near a river village. It carries the smell of grass, smoke, and drying meat. Corn hangs in braided strings or rests in storage. Dogs move in the dust. Children chase one another between lodges. A cooking pot bubbles slowly. The taste of the meal is hearty, touched by smoke and fat, soft kernels breaking between the teeth. Everywhere maize travels. It becomes local. It takes on new colours, names, planting songs, cooking methods, taboos, jokes, and memories. A seed from one land becomes a tradition in another. People select for fast ripening in northern climates, for drought tolerance in dry basins, for flavour, colour, texture, storage, and ceremonial beauty. The crop changes because people ask different things of it. Feed us here, grow in this soil, survive this frost, wait for this rain. Fit our hands, our pots, our stories. Night settles over the river. The fields darken first at their roots, then along the leaves, until the maize becomes a whispering wall. Frogs call from wet places. Smoke rises straight in the cooling air. You hold a warm bowl and feel its heat sink into your palms. Corners cross deserts, canyons, forests, grasslands, and rivers. It has done so not by force of its own tiny legs, thankfully, but through human networks of care, curiosity, need, and exchange. Each community has remade it, and in return, it has remade the possibilities of community. In the quiet between insect songs, you sense the enormous map of North America threaded with seeds, some planted, some traded, some carried in pouches, some saved through hunger, some lost to drought, some sprouting into futures no one can yet name. The leaves murmur in the dark, and the sound is not one language, but many. You arrive where the rivers gather power. The land opens into wide bottoms of dark soil and long grass, where water moves in shining bends beneath the sky. Morning fog lies over the floodplain like a pale blanket, and beyond it, shapes rise from the earth that are too regular to be hills. Mounds. Broad, stepped, deliberate mounds built by human hands, lifted basket by basket, load by load, season after season, until the ground itself seems to remember authority. You're in the Mississippian world, among societies that flourished across large parts of eastern North America from around the 9th century onward. Their towns, ceremonial centres, and farming villages spread along river valleys and fertile lands, connected by trade, politics, religion, and movement. Maize is now a powerful engine in this landscape. It fills bowls, supports dense populations, feeds gatherings, and helps make possible places like Cahokia, the great mound centre near the Mississippi River. The air smells of river mud, damp grass, smoke, and cooking maize. A breeze slides across the water and lifts the edges of woven mats. You hear the calls of water birds, the bark of dogs, the murmur of people beginning the day, and somewhere, the steady thump of work on packed earth. Your feet sink slightly into the moist ground. The soil feels rich and heavy, the kind that clings to the heel and makes every step remind you that fertility is not always tidy. You walk toward the fields first, because no great town floats above hunger. Maize grows in broad patches near the settlement, often in mounded fields or river-bottom soils that drink from seasonal floods. Beans and squash join it, and other plants fill the food world nuts from surrounding forests, fish from rivers, deer from woodland edges, wild fruits, and gathered greens. But maize has become central in many Mississippian communities. It is dependable enough, productive enough, and storable enough to help support larger towns and social systems with chiefs, priests, artisans, farmers, traders, and workers. The stalks are taller than you in places, their leaves brushing your arms with a dry whisper. Morning dew wets your fingers. The smell of green maize mixes with the sweetness of wet soil. People move through the field with practiced focus, weeding, checking ears, watching for animals. Birds wait nearby with suspicious innocence, as if they are not planning theft. Everyone knows they are. You follow a group carrying baskets of harvested ears toward the town. Their shoulders shine with sweat. The baskets creak softly. Kernels click together like tiny beads. The path leads past houses arranged around open areas, as past storage pits, past racks where food dries in the sun. Smoke rises from hearths. carrying the scent of boiling grain, roasting meat, and wood ash. Children chase one another through dust while adults pretend not to notice until the game comes dangerously close to something fragile. Ahead stands the massive central mound at Cahokia, known today as Monk's Mound. It rises in terraces, broad and imposing, dominating the settlement around it. To stand near it is to feel the weight of organised labour. Earth had to be dug, carried, placed, shaped, repaired, and maintained. It was not built by accident, unless a truly astonishing number of people tripped while holding baskets of soil. Its scale suggests leadership, planning, ritual purpose, and a society capable of mobilizing food and labor over time. Maize helps explain how such a place can grow. Stored harvest can feed people who gather for rituals, construction, trade, and political events. Surplus does not automatically create hierarchy, but it gives ambitious leaders something to work with. A chief who can host a feast, redistribute grain, support specialists, or sponsor mound building can turn food into obligation and awe. As ever, dinner and power are closer relatives than they like to admit. You enter a plaza, open and packed hard by countless feet. The sound changes here. Voices carry, drums or rattles pulse in the distance. The smell of smoke and human closeness thickens. People have come from nearby villages and perhaps from farther places, bringing food, goods, news, and expectations. Some wear ornaments of shell, copper, stone, or feathers. Traders display materials that have travelled long routes: marine shell from the Gulf Coast, copper from the Great Lakes region, stone from distant quarries, pigments, pottery, and finely made objects that signal status and connection. Near a cooking area, large pots sit over fire. Maize stews simmer slowly, releasing a warm, grainy scent into the air. The steam dampens your face. Someone stirs with a wooden paddle. Food is served in portions that reflect relationship and rank. Maybe everyone eats, but not everyone receives the same kind of attention. Public generosity can be sincere and strategic at once. Humans are very talented at making kindness politically useful. The mainstream fact remains clear. Maize agriculture was deeply tied to the rise of Mississippian population centres, including Cahokia, which became one of the largest pre-Columbian urban settlements north of Mexico. Its peak population is debated, but it was far larger and more complex than many people imagine when thinking of ancient North America. It had monumental mounds, plazas, neighbourhoods, specialised production, long-distance connections, and a surrounding countryside that helped feed and sustain it. You step into a house where maize is being prepared. The interior is dim and smoky, with packed floors and woven belongings arranged carefully along the walls. Dried ears hang from rafters. The husks rasp when moved. A grinding surface is dusted with meal. Hands turn kernels into food through patient pressure. The sound is low and repetitive, a soft rasping rhythm that seems to belong to the building itself. The work is essential and constant. Maize must be planted, guarded, harvested, dried, stored, processed, cooked, and saved as seed. A mound centre may impress visitors, but the quiet labour of fields and kitchens makes it possible. Much of that labour likely falls on women in many communities, though roles vary. Their expertise shapes diet, storage, household survival, and ceremonial preparation. History often points to the tallest mound and whispers, "Look there." But the meal in the pot is also architecture, it builds people. A quirky tidbit glints in this world of mounds and maize. Cahokia had a circle of large wooden posts now often called woodhenge, which appears to have marked solar alignments. Imagine tall posts standing against the sky, used to track seasonal events, perhaps guiding ritual calendars connected to planting, harvest, and ceremony. It sounds like something a modern roadside attraction would name with great enthusiasm. But the idea beneath it is serious. Time, Sky, power, and food all meet in the same open space. You stand near such a timber circle as the sun climbs. The posts cast long shadows across the ground. People may gather here at key times of year, watching the sun rise in meaningful positions. A farming society listens carefully to the sky, not because the sun is vague, but because human survival depends on knowing when to act. Plant too soon, and frost or flood may punish you. Plant too late, and the growing season may run away. Timekeeping is not abstract. It is hunger management with ceremony attached. The scholarly uncertainty enters as the day warms. Archaeologists still debate the exact causes of Cahokia's rise and decline. Maize agriculture clearly mattered, but so did climate shifts, flooding, drought, political authority, religious movements, trade networks, immigration, social tensions, and environmental strain. Some evidence suggests that rapid growth placed pressure on wood supplies, soils, and local resources. Other interpretations emphasize political fragmentation or changing beliefs. There is no single neat answer, because large human societies rarely collapse for one reason. They prefer a group project. You walk to the edge of the town where the fields meet woodland. Trees have been cut for houses, fires, palisades, tools, and mound construction needs. The scent here is sharp with fresh wooden bark. A woodpecker taps somewhere above. You can see how a large settlement requires constant resources. Firewood must be gathered from farther away if nearby stands thin. Fields need fertility. Stored grain must be protected from damp and pests. Waste must go somewhere. People must cooperate, or at least cooperate enough. Yet the town is not merely stressed. It is vibrant. Potters shape clay vessels with careful hands. Shell workers carve ornaments. Traders speak with travellers. Ritual specialists prepare offerings. Farmers arrive with food. Children learn the paths between houses, mounds, and fields. The place hums with ambition and routine, with devotion and annoyance, with grandeur and chores. You feel the packed earth of a mound stair beneath your feet. As you climb, the air opens. The river flashes in the distance. Smoke rises from many hearths, blue against the green-brown land. Fields spread outward in patches, and beyond them lie smaller communities tied to the centre by obligation, kinship, ceremony, exchange, or pressure. From above, the town looks ordered, but not silent. It is a living body, and maize is one of the pulses moving through it. A ceremony begins below. You hear drumming, measured and deep. Voices rise, then fall. Feathers shift in the light. Food may be carried as offering. The smell of cooked maize drifts upward, mixing with smoke and warm earth. The mood is not sleepy for the people below, but for you. Watching from a gentle distance, it becomes rhythmic, almost dreamlike. Drum, breath, leap, river, drum, breath, leaf, river. As evening approaches, the plaza glows copper. Shadows lengthen down the sides of the mounds. Workers return from fields with empty baskets and tired shoulders. The maize leaves darken into a single murmuring mass. Fires brighten one by one. Meals are shared. Somewhere, a leader receives guests. Somewhere, a household argues quietly about food stores. Somewhere, a child falls asleep before finishing a bowl. The Mississippian harvest builds more than stomachs. It builds towns, ranks, gatherings, calendars, obligations, and monuments of earth. Corn is not the whole story, but it is one of the steady forces beneath the visible world. It feeds the hands that carry soil, the mouths that chant in plazas, the travellers who follow rivers, the households that endure heat, flood, insects, and politics. Night settles over Cahokia and the river plain. Frogs begin their chorus. Smoke thickens under the stars. The great mounds become dark shapes against a dim sky, steady and immense. In storage pits and houses, dried maize waits in silence, holding sunlight from another season. You feel the cool earth beneath you, hear the river moving beyond the town, and sense how a grain multiplied into fields can help lift whole landscapes into memory. You climb into thinner air, where the mountains rise like sleeping giants beneath a clean, hard sky. The path under your feet is narrow and stony. It cuts along a slope where grasses bend in the wind and clouds move so close they seem almost within reach. Each breath feels cooler than the last. The air smells of frost, dry earth, llama wool, wood smoke, and distant rain. Far below, valleys open in green folds, while above you, ridges hold patches of snow that shine in the morning light. You're in the Andes, a world where height changes everything. A short walk can take you from warm valley crops to cold upland pastures. Sunlight is fierce, nights can bite, and farming is less a simple activity than a negotiation with altitude, slope, stone, water, and patience. Maize arrives here not as the only great food, but as one important crop among many, joining a landscape already rich with potatoes, quinoa, beans, peppers, tubers, fruits, and camelid herding. The mainstream fact is that maize became significant in many Andean societies, especially in warmer valleys and ceremonial contexts, while potatoes and other highland crops remained essential at higher elevations. This matters because the Andes did not become a corn kingdom in the same way as some regions of Mesoamerica. Instead, maize found its places valley floors, terraced slopes, ritual feasts, elite storehouses, fermented drinks, and long-distance exchange between ecological zones. You descend slightly into a valley where the air warms and the smell changes. The sharp mineral scent softens into damp soil and flowering shrubs. Terraces step down the hillsides, their stone walls catching light. Water glimmers in narrow channels, guided carefully from streams and springs. Maize grows in ordered patches, its leaves rustling against a breeze that travels down from the high passes. A farmer steps along the terrace edge, testing the moisture with bare fingers. The stone wall is warm where the sun touches it and cold in the shade. You can hear water whispering through a channel, a quiet, precious sound. Every drop has been persuaded to move where people need it. In these mountains, water management is not a luxury. It is survival with better engineering. The maize here may be large kernel varieties suited to local tastes and uses. Some ears are pale, some purple, some red, some mottled like tiny painted stones. They dry in the sun on mats or hang under shelter, their husks crackling in the highland air. The kernels feel hard and smooth in your palm. When poured into a vessel, they make a bright, clicking sound, crisp as small beads. You enter a village where houses cling to the slope. Smoke rises into cold morning air. Llamas chew with calm superiority, as if they know they are essential and intend to remain difficult. Women sort crops near a wall, separating potatoes, maize, beans, and dried peppers. Children chase each other until an elder says something that instantly reduces their enthusiasm. Somewhere nearby, grain is being toasted, and the smell is nutty, warm, and comforting. Maize becomes part of Andean feasting in powerful ways. Ground, boiled, roasted, or brewed, it can turn a gathering into an event. One of its most important transformations is chicha, a fermented maize drink that becomes central to hospitality, ritual, labor organization, and political life in many Andean societies. To drink together is to enter a relationship. To provide drink is to display abundance, generosity, rank, and control over resources. You sit in the shade of a wall while chicha is poured into a cup. It smells sour-sweet, earthy, and faintly yeasty. The vessel feels cool against your fingers. The drink is social before it is nutritional. People share it during work parties, ceremonies, negotiations, and celebrations. A leader who can sponsor a feast with maize beer can gather labour, loyalty, and prestige. Once again, corn finds its way into politics by becoming delicious enough to matter. The atmosphere shifts as people prepare for a communal task. A terrace wall needs repair, or a canal must be cleared, or a field must be planted. Food and drink are assembled. Baskets of maize sit beside potatoes and dried meat. The work will be hard, but the gathering has warmth. Voices rise in jokes and teasing. Someone complains about the slope, which is fair. The slope has been there for ages and still has not become convenient. A quirky tidbit appears in the froth of ritual life in some Andean traditions. Maize beer was so important that special vessels were made for drinking ceremonies, including paired cups used to express reciprocity. Two people could drink in a formal exchange, each acknowledging obligation and balance. It is a little like signing a contract, except with more fermentation and probably better conversation. You walk farther along the mountain road, and the world expands into a web of zones. Highland communities exchange with valley farmers. Coastal people send fish, shells, cotton, and salt inland. Valley maize moves upward. Potatoes move downward. Llamas carry loads along paths that twist through passes and plains. The Andes teach you that a civilization can be built vertically, with people linking different altitudes like floors in a living house. Maize travels within this vertical world. It is not grown everywhere, because frost is a stern landlord, but where it thrives, it becomes valuable. In later Andean empires, including the Inca, maize is cultivated for state use, ritual consumption, elite feasting, and redistribution. Storehouses hold dried foods. Roads connect regions. Labour obligations bring people together to farmland set aside for rulers, temples, or communities. Maize stands among the crops that help power administration, ceremony, and exchange. You enter a storage building in a cool, dry place where air moves through carefully arranged openings. The smell is dusty, starchy, and faintly sweet. Dried ears rest in piles or containers, protected from damp. The walls are stone, rough under your hand. Food stored here is time made visible. It can feed workers, armies, priests, travellers, or people in need during a hard season. A kernel saved in dryness is a small refusal to panic. Yet maize does not belong only to the mountains. You follow it down toward warmer lowlands and out toward island shores, where sea wind replaces thin mountain air. The Caribbean opens before you in blue and green, with bright water, humid heat, and the smell of salt, fish, palm smoke, and tropical fruit. Here, maize joins cassava, sweet potatoes, beans, peppers, peanuts, fruits, and seafood in indigenous food systems shaped by island environments and canoe travel. In the Caribbean, cassava often holds a central place, especially because it can grow well in tropical soils and be processed into durable bread. Maize is present too, but its role varies from island to island and community to community. You stand near a village where gardens are planted in mounds called canucos, raised and managed to support crops in warm, wet conditions. Leaves glisten after rain. The soil smells rich and alive. A parrot shrieks from a tree as if objecting to the entire human project. The sea is close enough to hear. Waves fold onto the shore with a soft, repeating hush. Canoes rest on the sand, their wood warm beneath the sun. Fish dry on racks. Maize may be roasted, ground, or cooked into porridges, sharing space with cassava cakes and peppery stews. The taste of the meal is bright and smoky, touched by salt air. Your fingers feel sticky from fruit and roughened by grain. Caribbean exchange networks carry crops, tools, ornaments, and stories across water. Seeds travel by canoe. So do people, marriages, rituals, and rumours, which need no sail at all. Maize, by now, is a crop of movement as much as settlement. It can take root in a mountain valley, a tropical garden, a river bottom, or a coastal village, provided people adapt it and decide it belongs. The scholarly uncertainty here is wide and fascinating. Historians and archaeologists still debate how maize moved through parts of South America and the Caribbean, and how important it was compared with cassava, potatoes, quinoa, and other local staples in different societies. Plant remains are unevenly preserved, and food preparation often leaves faint traces. In some places, maize may have been everyday food. In others, it may have held special ritual or elite value. The same crop can be ordinary in one valley and prestigious in another, which is very human of it. You return in thought to the mountain terraces as evening settles over the Andes. The air cools quickly, shadows fill the folds of the hills, maize leaves rustle in a valley below, while high above, herders gather animals against the cold. Smoke rises straight into a purple sky. A cup of chicha passes from hand to hand, and the warmth of the group presses gently against the chill. Then the scene softens again toward the islands, where night air is warm and scented with salt. A cooking fire glows near the shore. Waves breathe in and out. Maize kernels toast in a clay vessel, popping faintly now and then, each tiny sound disappearing into the large hush of the sea. Across mountains and islands, corn becomes a traveller with many identities. It is not always the main character, and that makes its story richer. It learns to stand beside potatoes in the heights, cassava near the sea, fish on the coast, quinoa in the uplands, and fruits in the humid gardens. It enters feasts, offerings, drinks, storehouses, and household meals. It becomes part of reciprocity, ceremony, politics, and comfort. You hold one kernel between your fingers in the dimming light. It is small, hard, and quiet, yet it has crossed cliffs, valleys, terraces, roads, and water. It has been planted under mountain sun and island rain. It has been carried by traders, farmers, sailors, herders, mothers, elders, and children. Around you, the Andes darken into blue silence, and far away, waves continue their patient rhythm on Caribbean sand. In both places, maize listens to human hands and answers in its own green language. You stand at the edge of an Atlantic dawn, where sails appear like pale ghosts against a brightening sea. The air smells of salt, tar, wet rope, and human uncertainty. Waves slap against wooden hulls with a steady hollow sound. Men move across decks, coughing in the morning damp, muttering prayers, orders, complaints, and possibly all three at once. Barrels creak, canvas snaps. Somewhere below, stored food shifts in the hold, packed tightly beside tools, weapons, trade goods, and the anxious imagination of empire. Maize is about to cross the ocean, not by choice, of course. Plants are rarely consulted on global history, which is probably for the best, because corn might have asked for a less chaotic travel agent. But after 1492, maize becomes part of the Columbian exchange. The vast movement of crops, animals, diseases, people, technologies, and ideas between the Americas, Europe, Africa, and Asia. The exchange transforms diets around the world, often in ways that are practical, astonishing, and deeply painful. Corn travels with conquest, curiosity, hunger, and trade, and it will never again belong to only one hemisphere. You are still in the Caribbean heat for a moment, watching Europeans encounter foods they do not fully understand. They see indigenous communities growing maize in gardens and fields, cooking it in many forms and storing it with skill. They observe kernels, cobs, cakes, porridges, roasted ears, and fermented drinks. Some are curious, some are dismissive, some are simply hungry enough to learn quickly, which has always been one of humanity's better educational systems. The mainstream fact is clear Europeans first encountered maize in the Americas and carried it back across the Atlantic in the late 15th and early 16th centuries. From Iberia, It spread through the Mediterranean, Africa, the Middle East, and eventually much of Europe and Asia. Its appeal was obvious. It could grow in warm climates, produce large yields, and adapt to many soils and seasons. It fed people who had little land. It fed livestock. It fit into old farming systems while also disrupting them. You step onto a dock in Spain, where the cargo is unloaded beneath sharp sunlight. The smell changes from tropical humidity to seaweed, fish, wool, garlic, sweat, and stone warmed by the day. Sailors carry sacks and bundles. Merchants inspect strange goods. Among them are maize ears and kernels, golden, red, blue, white, perhaps mottled, each one carrying an American history that no European label can capture. At first, maize is a curiosity. Scholars and gardeners study it. Nobles may display it as an exotic plant from new lands. People argue over what it is and where it belongs in the old categories of knowledge. European writers often confuse unfamiliar crops, misname them, or link them to places where they merely passed through. Maize becomes Turkish wheat in some languages, not because it came from Turkey, but because Europeans had a charming habit of calling unfamiliar Eastern or foreign things Turkish when sure. History is full of confident labelling and very little humility. A quirky tidbit waits right there in the names. In parts of Europe, maize was called Indian corn, Turkey corn, or grano turco, meaning Turkish grain in Italian. The plant, born in the Americas, gathers aliases like a traveller trying to avoid paperwork. These names reveal less about the plant's origin and more about European confusion, trade routes, and the habit of making geography sound tidy after the fact. You walk into a monastery garden where maize grows as a specimen. The leaves are broad and unfamiliar beside herbs, cabbages, and medicinal plants. A monk touches the tassel with cautious interest. The stalk is tall, almost theatrical. It does not look like wheat, barley, rye, or oats. The ear is hidden in husk, secretive and slightly smug. When opened, rows of kernels shine with orderly abundance. To European farmers, that abundance matters. Fields of wheat can fail, rye can struggle. Peasants often live close to hunger, their diets shaped by rents, taxes, weather, war, and the endless moods of landlords, who historically have not been known for being relaxing. Maize offers another option, especially in regions with warm summers and suitable rainfall. It can produce heavily from small plots. It can be boiled into porridge, baked into flatbreads, fed to animals, or ground into meal. You move through northern Italy, where maize gradually settles into peasant diets and becomes linked with polenta. The kitchen is dim, smoky, and warm. A pot hangs over the fire. Someone stirs yellow meal into bubbling water with a long wooden paddle. The sound is thick and wet, a slow folding rhythm. Steam rises, carrying the smell of grain and smoke. The mixture thickens into something filling, plain, and dependable. A bowl is placed in your hands. It warms your palms. The texture is soft, heavy, comforting. For people with little access to meat or fine bread, maize porridge can be a blessing. It fills the stomach. It grows well. It can be stored. It makes survival more possible. But survival can have hidden terms. Here, the story darkens gently but importantly. In the Americas, many communities process maize with alkaline substances such as lime or ash, making niacin more available and improving nutrition. In parts of Europe, maize is adopted without that knowledge or without the same cultural practices. When poor communities rely too heavily on untreated maize, pellagra can appear, a disease linked to niacin deficiency. Its symptoms are miserable, and for a long time Europeans do not understand the cause. You feel the irony settle over the kitchen. The crop was not the problem by itself. The missing knowledge was corn crossed the ocean, but not always with the full system of preparation that had made it so nourishing in its homelands. This is one of history's recurring little cruelties. People take the thing and ignore the expertise attached to it, then act surprised when the results become unpleasant. Very elegant civilization. Truly. Still, maize keeps spreading. You cross into the Balkans, where it enters village agriculture. You move along the Mediterranean, where it joins old crop rotations. You pass through Portugal and Spain, where it becomes part of local farming. In Africa, maize arrives through Portuguese and other trade routes and begins to transform food systems in many regions, especially where climate and farming practices suit it. Over time, maize becomes central in parts of southern, eastern, and central Africa, prepared as porridges, stiff pastes, breads, and drinks. It joins sorghum, millet, yams, cassava, rice, and local crops, becoming local in new ways. The atmosphere changes as you step into an African field. The sun is bright, the soil is warm beneath your feet. Women hoe between maize plants while voices rise in conversation. The air smells of dry grass, smoke, and cooking porridge. A child carries a bundle of stalks. Chickens scratch nearby with the self-importance of tiny officials. Maize grows into village routines, seasonal hunger, market exchange, and household cooking. It is no longer an American stranger. It has become part of another food world. But the spread of maize is not innocent. It moves alongside the expansion of European empires and the violence of the Atlantic slave trade. In some places, maize helps provision ships, forts, plantations, and armies. It feeds enslaved people, sailors, soldiers, and labourers. It becomes entangled with coercion as well as survival. A crop that nourishes can also be used within systems of exploitation. The kernel itself is not guilty, but history often places useful things into cruel hands. You stand near a coastal fort where waves strike stone. The smell is salt, sweat, fear, and smoke. Sacks of grain sit in storage. Food is power here in its starkest form. Whoever controls it can command movement, labour, endurance, and suffering. Maize's portability and productivity make it valuable not only in homes and fields, but in the machinery of empire. The soft food in a bowl and the hard ration in a hold belong to the same global story. Scholars still argue about how quickly maize spread in different parts of Europe, Africa, and Asia, and how much of its adoption came from peasant choice, state policy, trade incentives, ecological suitability, or pressure from landlords and colonial systems. The evidence can be patchy farming records, botanical drawings, cookbooks, tax documents, travellers' accounts, and archaeological remains do not always agree neatly. In some regions, maize transformed diets within a few generations. In others, it remained marginal for longer. Crops travel along roads, but also through taste, class, climate, and power. You enter an early modern scholar's study. It smells of ink, leather, dust, and dried plants. A maize specimen lies on a table, its husks pulled back. The scholar writes carefully, trying to fit this crop into inherited categories from ancient texts. But maize refuses to be classical. It was not known to Aristotle, Pliny, or Galen. It does not politely belong to the old Mediterranean imagination. It is new to European scholarship, even though it is ancient beyond measure in its own lands. That mismatch matters. European knowledge systems often treat American crops as discoveries, as if a plant begins existing when someone writes about it in Latin. You can almost hear maize sighing. It has been domesticated, named, cooked, sung over, traded, selected, stored, and made sacred for millennia. And now someone with a quill is wondering whether it is a type of wheat. The confidence is breathtaking. Yet kitchens understand faster than books. In a peasant home, maize meal becomes supper. In a farmyard, it fattens pigs and chickens. In a market, it is measured, bargained over, and poured into sacks. On hillsides, it grows where other grains struggle. Along trade routes, it travels farther. Across centuries, maize helps population growth in some regions by increasing food supply, while also sometimes deepening dependence on a narrow diet. It can be a rescue crop, a poverty crop, a cash crop, a subsistence crop, a symbol of foreignness, and eventually a tradition so familiar people forget it ever arrived from elsewhere. Evening settles over a European village. The fields are golden green under low light. Church bells sound in the distance. Smoke rises from chimneys. Inside a cottage, someone stirs a pot of maize porridge while rain taps at the roof. The wooden spoon moves slowly, round and round, turning kernels from a far continent into tonight's warmth. Across the sea, in Africa, another pot thickens over another fire. Across the Mediterranean, another farmer saves seed. Across the Atlantic, indigenous communities continue to grow maize with knowledge far older than the empires now carrying it away. The crop has become global, but its roots remain deep in American soil. You hold a kernel in your palm and imagine its journey field to basket, basket to ship, ship to port, port to garden, garden to field, field to bowl. It crosses languages and climates. It is renamed, misunderstood, cherished, exploited, improved, and blamed. It feeds the poor and supports the powerful. It becomes both comfort and commodity. The sea wind rises softly. The sails creak. Somewhere in the dark hold of a ship, maize waits among barrels and rope, silent as a seed can be. The ocean is wide, but the crop has already begun to remake the world beyond it. One field, one kitchen, one uneasy empire at a time. You step into a field where morning light lies flat across rows of corn, and the world smells of damp soil, animal breath, and work waiting to begin. The stalks stand in close ranks, their leaves pale at the edges where dew clings and glitters. A rooster calls from somewhere near a low farmhouse. Harness leather creaks. A wooden gate knocks gently in the breeze. The air is cool enough to make your hands curl, but the day promises heat. Around you, the crop has entered a new and complicated age. It is no longer only a sacred food, a village staple, or a traveller across oceans. It is becoming tied to colonies, plantations, slavery, land hunger, scientific breeding, railroads, factories, and markets that stretch farther than any one farmer can see. In colonial North America, corn is everywhere because it is useful. It grows in many soils. It can feed households, livestock, soldiers, traders, and enslaved workers. It can be ground into meal, boiled into porridge, baked into breads, roasted fresh, dried for storage, or used to fatten pigs. For European settlers, corn becomes a survival crop, though that survival often depends on knowledge learned from indigenous peoples whose lands are being taken. History can be very proud of its harvests while being strangely quiet about who taught whom to plant. You walk beside a small colonial farm, where corn grows near beans, pumpkins, tobacco, and kitchen gardens. The soil smells sharp from manure. Chickens scratch between scattered husks. A woman lifts a heavy pot from the hearth, steam clouding her face. Inside, cornmeal mush thickens into breakfast. The room is smoky, warm and dim, with the scent of ash, boiled grain, wool, and human fatigue. A child waits near the table with a wooden bowl, looking hopeful in the way hungry children do across every century. Corn fits easily into the practical demands of settlement. It can be planted with simple tools. It stores better than many fresh foods. It turns into feed for animals, which then become meat, labour, hides, and manure. In some regions, pigs are driven through woodlands and finished on corn. Cattle and horses eat it too. The crop begins to serve not just human stomachs, but the whole expanding farm economy. Yet the land itself is not empty. The growth of colonial agriculture comes through displacement, treaty violations, warfare, disease, and pressure on indigenous communities. Fields spread where older food systems, hunting grounds, towns, and sacred places already exist. Corn, once shaped by indigenous farmers, is now pulled into settler expansion. The plant remains generous. The systems around it often are not. You cross into the plantation south, where the warmth deepens and the air carries the smell of wet earth, river mud, wood smoke, and cotton leaves. Corn stands beside fields of tobacco, rice, indigo, and later cotton. It is often grown to feed enslaved people and livestock. On plantations, corn rations become part of a brutal system of forced labour. The crop that can mean community and ceremony in one setting becomes ration, control, and endurance in another. You stand near slave quarters at dusk. The air is heavy, close, buzzing with insects. A pot simmers over a small fire, and the smell of cornmeal mixes with greens, smoke, and perhaps a little meat if someone has managed to stretch resources or cultivate a garden plot. Hands stir slowly. Bodies ache from the day. Voices are low. Here, corn is not romantic. It is survival under violence. It fills the stomach, but it also marks deprivation when diets are narrow and controlled by enslavers. And still, people make culture from constraint. Enslaved Africans and their descendants transform cornmeal into dishes shaped by African, indigenous, and European influences. Hoe cakes, ash cakes, grits, spoon bread, and other foods carry histories of adaptation. A simple corn cake cooked on a hot surface may be meal, memory, resistance, and care all at once. The texture is crisp at the edge, soft in the middle, smoky from the fire. You hold it in your hand and feel how much human dignity can exist inside something plain. The mainstream fact of this age is clear corn became a major crop in the expanding agricultural economy of North America, serving as food for people, feed for animals, and raw material for trade and industry. Its importance grew especially in the United States, to where it became central to mixed farming systems and, eventually, to the grain belt of the Midwest. Corn helped feed westward settlement, but westward settlement also helped create the conditions for corn's enormous expansion. You move into the 19th century and the landscape opens into rolling fields, prairie edges, and river towns. The smell of tall grass, fresh-cut hay, manure, and wood smoke fills the air. Wagons groan under sacks of grain. Horses snort in the traces. Barns rise against the sky, and corn cribs stand slatted to let air move through drying ears. The kernels inside are hard, yellow, white, red, or mixed, rattling when the wind shakes the structure. Corn has become a farmer's currency in practical form. It can be sold, but if roads are bad and markets distant, it may be converted into something easier to transport. Pigs eat corn and walk themselves to market, which is very helpful of them. Though perhaps not from the pig's perspective. Distillers turn corn into whiskey, a compact and profitable product on the frontier. Corn becomes meat, alcohol, labour power, and cash. The field is now connected to stores, riverboats, mills, and distant buyers. A quirky tidbit rises with the smell of mash from a frontier still in some places. Whiskey was jokingly called a way to make corn portable. A farmer could struggle to haul bulky grain over poor roads, or turn it into barrels of liquor worth more by weight. It is not exactly the bedtime health advice portion of history, but economically, it made sense. Corn had found a way to travel wearing a very different disguise. You hear the creak of a watermill beside a stream. Corn is poured between grinding stones, and meal falls into sacks in a pale yellow flow. The mill smells of dust, damp wood, grain, and river water. Fine powder settles on your sleeves. The sound is steady and enclosing. Stone turning against stone, gears groaning, water splashing over the wheel. Farmers wait and talk, comparing weather, prices, pests, and neighbours, the four eternal subjects of rural life. Then the railroads arrive and the soundscape changes. Iron wheels clatter, steam hisses, whistles cut across fields and towns. Grain elevators rise beside tracks, tall wooden structures that collect harvest from many farms and push corn into a larger commercial system. A farmer no longer has to rely only on nearby markets. Corn can move towards cities, ports, stockyards, and factories. Chicago becomes a great hub where grain, livestock, railroads, and finance meet in a loud, smoky embrace. You walk through a rail town at harvest. The air is filled with coal smoke, dust, manure, and hot metal. Men shovel grain. Horses pull wagons. Sacks are stacked. Elevators rumble. Kernels pour in golden streams, each one small, but together forming a force large enough to shift economies. Corn is losing its household intimacy and gaining industrial scale. This is impressive, and also slightly alarming, which is a common combination in modern history. Scientific agriculture begins to change the crop as well. Farmers and researchers experiment with varieties, yields, disease resistance, and adaptation to local conditions. Seed selection becomes more formal. Agricultural colleges, experiment stations, seed companies, and farm journals spread advice. By the early 20th century, hybrid corn breeding begins to transform yields dramatically, especially after farmers adopt hybrid seed more widely in the United States. You stand in a demonstration field where men in hats inspect rows of corn with notebooks in hand. The plants look uniform, strong, almost disciplined. Their leaves shine under the sun. The smell is hot and green. A researcher points out differences in ear size, stalk strength, and kernel type. Farmers listen with interest and suspicion, because farmers have always had a healthy relationship with optimism useful, but never to be trusted completely. Hybrid corn is a major change. Unlike older open-pollinated varieties saved from year to year, many hybrids produce especially vigorous first-generation plants, but do not breed true if farmers save the seed. This encourages annual seed purchases and gives seed companies increasing influence. Higher yields can mean more food and profit, but also more dependence on commercial systems. Corn grows taller in the field, while the economy around it grows more complicated. Scholars still debate how to weigh the benefits of hybridization and industrial agriculture against the loss of local seed diversity, farmer autonomy, and ecological resilience. Some emphasize the enormous gains in productivity that helped feed growing populations and livestock herds. Others point to increased dependence on purchased seed, fertilizers, machinery, and markets. The question is not whether corn became more productive. It did. The question is what kind of world was built around that productivity, and who gained or lost within it. You step into the early industrial food system, where corn is no longer only visible as kernels or meal. It disappears into other things: starch, syrup, oil, alcohol, livestock feed, adhesives, paper products, textiles. Later, plastics and fuel. A factory smells different from a field hot metal, steam, wet starch, grease, and sweetness thick enough to cling in the throat. Corn arrives by the ton and leaves wearing many masks. Inside a processing plant, machines churn and hiss. Workers move between vats, pipes, sacks, and gauges. The sound is constant, metallic, almost hypnotic. Corn is soaked, milled, separated, refined, and transformed. The golden kernel is broken into components, each with a destination. Germ becomes oil. Starch becomes thickener or sweetener. Protein becomes feed. Nothing seems to remain simple. Even the smell of corn becomes divided. Outside, livestock operations grow alongside grain production. Corn feeds cattle, pigs, and chickens, turning plant calories into meat, milk, and eggs for expanding urban populations. Cities grow hungry in new ways. Workers need cheap food. Markets demand regular supply. Cornfields in the Midwest become connected to dinner plates in distant neighborhoods, to immigrant kitchens, to army rations, to school lunches, to factory canteens, to every place where modern life wants food to be abundant and predictable. You walk through a Midwestern farm at sunset. The rows stretch far toward the horizon, straighter and denser than any ancient field. The air smells of dust, dry leaves, gasoline, and warm soil. A mechanical harvester rests near the barn, its metal body cooling after work. Crickets begin to call, the farmhouse windows glow. Somewhere inside, a family eats, perhaps with cornbread on the table, perhaps with meat from animals fattened on corn, perhaps with food containing corn in forms no one thinks to name. The crop has become both visible and invisible. You can see it in the field, high and rustling. You cannot always see it in the market, where it hides in sweeteners, starches, oils, feeds, and industrial ingredients. Corn has learned the modern trick of being everywhere while pretending not to be. Night spreads over the farm. The rows darken into long, whispering corridors. A breeze moves through dry leaves with a papery sound, like pages turning in a book no one has finished reading. You feel the rough edge of a husk between your fingers, smell the dust of harvest. Hear a train far away carrying grain towards cities and factories. Corn has entered the age of systems. Fields lead to railroads, railroads to stockyards, stockyards to kitchens, laboratories to seed catalogues, factories to shelves, and policies to planting decisions. The crop that once asked for human attention now commands institutions, machines, markets, and science. It still grows from seed and soil, still needs rain and sun, still rustles in the dark like any plant, but around it the world has become vast, loud, profitable, and uneasy. And as you stand beside the field under a deepening sky, you sense that corn has not stopped being food. It has simply become many other things as well. Labour, capital, industry, invention, survival, dependency, comfort, and quiet power stored in every row. You stand in a modern cornfield, and the first thing you notice is the scale. The rows run farther than your eyes want to follow. Straight green corridors narrowing into the haze. The morning air is warm, carrying the smell of damp soil, pollen, cut grass, diesel, and leaves heated by the rising sun. Each stalk stands close to the next, shoulder to shoulder, a vast crowd of plants whispering whenever the wind passes through. The sound is papery and soft, but there are millions of leaves, so the field speaks in a low, continuous hush. You're in the world corn is made, and it is not one world. It is dinner and gasoline. It is cattle feed and sweetener. It is seed technology, farm debt, county fairs, sacred memory, school lunches, tortillas, popcorn, ethanol, export ships, food labels, harvest festivals, and arguments at policy meetings where everyone uses very serious acronyms. Corn has become so ordinary that it nearly disappears into the background of modern life, which is exactly how powerful things often behave. The mainstream fact is simple but enormous today. Corn is one of the most widely grown crops on Earth, and in the United States it is the largest crop by acreage and total production. Much of it is not eaten directly as sweet corn on a summer plate. A large share becomes livestock feed, ethanol fuel, industrial starches, corn oil, and sweeteners. Corn is visible in fields, but in the supermarket it is often hidden in ingredient lists, supply chains, and the bodies of animals raised on grain. You walk between the rows, the leaves brush your arms, dry along the edges and smooth down the middle. The soil is dark, compacted in places by heavy machinery. Somewhere nearby, an irrigation system ticks and sprays water in a slow, metallic rhythm. The droplets smell faintly of minerals and warm dust as they hit the ground. A tractor moves in the distance, its engine low and steady, like thunder that learned to follow instructions. Modern corn is highly bred, often hybrid, sometimes genetically engineered, and usually supported by fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, machinery, insurance systems, commodity markets, and government policies. It grows in a world of satellites, soil sensors, seed patents, futures contracts, and global shipping. Yet at the base of every stalk is the same ancient bargain seed: soil, weather, labour, risk. The packaging has become more complicated. The plant still needs rain. You stop near a field edge where a farmer checks a tablet showing maps of yield zones. The screen glows bright against the morning. It shows the field as data: moisture, fertility, elevation, plant health, expected output. The farmer's boots are muddy. His hands are rough. The technology may be sleek, but the decisions still land in the body. When to plant, when to spray, when to harvest, whether prices will cover costs, whether the weather, in its grand tradition of emotional instability, plans to cooperate. The atmosphere is peaceful from a distance and anxious up close. A cornfield can look calm while carrying debt, climate risk, market pressure, and family history in every row. Many farmers operate on thin margins. Seed, fertilizer, machinery, land, fuel, and labour are expensive. Commodity prices rise and fall in ways that can turn a good harvest into a financial shrug. Growing abundance is not the same as feeling secure. You walk toward a grain elevator where the quiet of the field becomes a roar. Trucks line up during harvest, each carrying corn in yellow heaps. The air is dusty, dry, and sweet, with a sharp edge of exhaust. Grain pours into pits with a rushing sound like heavy rain. Elevators rumble, metal gates clank. Workers shout over machinery. Kernels move upward, sideways, downward, measured and weighed, their individuality completely ignored, which is rude but efficient. From here, corn enters many paths. Some of it becomes feed for cattle, pigs, and chickens. You step into the edge of a feedlot where the smell is strong manure, grain, dust, warm animals, and fermented feed. It is not exactly lavender bedtime mist, but it is part of the story. Corn helps produce enormous quantities of meat, eggs, and dairy for modern diets. It turns fields into animal calories on a scale that would astonish earlier farmers. It also raises questions about land use, water, animal welfare, greenhouse gases, and whether cheap food is ever truly cheap if the hidden costs are counted later. Some corn becomes ethanol. You enter a processing plant where the air is warm and yeasty, almost like bread and fuel arguing in the same room. Tanks shine under electric light. Pipes hum. Fermentation transforms cornstarch into alcohol for blending into gasoline. Supporters describe ethanol as a domestic fuel source and a market for farmers. Critics question its environmental benefits, land demands, and efficiency. Corn, once cooked on stones and stirred in village pots, now helps power engines. The plant has range, perhaps too much range. Some corn becomes sweetener, especially high fructose corn syrup. In a factory, the smell is faintly sweet, wet, and industrial. Cornstarch is broken down and transformed into sugars that flow into soft drinks, candies, baked goods, sauces, and processed foods. You may not see corn on the label at first glance, but there it is, quietly attending lunch in disguise. This hidden presence has made corn central to debates over nutrition, obesity, food systems, and corporate agriculture. A quirky tidbit waits in the snack aisle. Because corn has not lost its sense of theatre, popcorn is a special type of maize with a hard outer shell and moisture inside the kernel. When heated, Pressure builds until the kernel bursts into the airy shape people have somehow agreed to eat by the bucket in dark movie theatres. Popcorn's expansion can be dramatic, sometimes over 30 times its original size. Imagine an ancient teosinte seed hearing that and thinking, honestly, the descendants have become very loud. You pass a movie theatre lobby where butter scent floats through the air. Though the butter may be more complicated than hope, the popcorn is warm, salty, crisp, and ridiculous in the best way. A child reaches into a tub bigger than their head. Nearby, adults pretend they will not finish it before the previews. Corn, in this form, is not empire or industry. It is comfort, habit, and a little shared joy under dim lights. But the modern corn world also contains loss. In many places, industrial agriculture favours uniform varieties over local diversity. Older land races, with their colours, flavours, shapes, drought tolerances, ceremonial roles, and regional memories, can be pushed aside. Seed diversity matters because it carries options for the future. A uniform crop may be efficient, but it can be vulnerable to pests, diseases, climate shifts, and changing needs. Diversity is not decorative. It is a library written in kernels. You enter a seed bank where the air is cool and dry. Shelves hold carefully labelled samples: blue maize, flour corn, flint corn, dent corn, sweet corn, popcorn, land races from high valleys, deserts, islands, forests, and plains. Small packets rest in cold storage, each one a memory of farmers who selected, saved, traded, protected, and loved their corn across generations. The room smells faintly of paper, dust, and chilled air. It feels less like a warehouse, and more like a sleeping archive. Scholars still argue over how best to balance modern yield, farmer livelihoods, biodiversity, indigenous seed sovereignty, climate resilience, and global food demand. Some point to biotechnology, precision farming, and improved hybrids as necessary tools for feeding people under stress. Others emphasize agroecology, local seed systems, soil health, and the rights of communities to control the crops they inherited and shaped. The debate is not simply science against tradition. It is a question of values, what counts as abundance, who decides, and what kind of future a field should serve. You travel in thought to indigenous communities where corn remains a relative, not a commodity. It is planted with prayer, guarded through seed saving, cooked for ceremonies, and carried in stories. Blue corn meal dusts the hands, white corn is boiled for soups, red kernels glow in woven baskets, corn pollen is handled with reverence. In Haudenosaunee communities, corn, beans, and squash are honoured as the three sisters, sustaining foods with deep cultural meaning. In Pueblo worlds, corn can be connected to blessing, emergence, and identity. In many places, seeds are not merely genetic material, they are inheritance. You sit near a kitchen where tortillas puff on a hot comel. The smell is warm, mineral, and deeply familiar. A bowl of masa waits under cloth. Hands press dough with a rhythm learned by watching others. The tortilla lifts, soft and steaming. It tastes of earth, lime, fire, and time. Somewhere nearby, a pot of pozole simmers. Somewhere else, arepas brown on a griddle, tamales steam in leaves, cornbread cools on a counter, grits thicken slowly, chicha ferments, elote is brushed with sauce and sprinkled with chile. The crop speaks many cuisines, and each one insists it is not merely food, but home. Modern corn is global now. In Africa, stiff maize porridges such as ugali, sadza, nasima, and papa staples in many regions. In Europe, polenta remains beloved. In East and Southeast Asia, corn appears in snacks, soups, animal feed, street foods, and industrial products. In Latin America, it remains central to cuisines and identities from Mexico to the Andes. Each place has made corn local again. That may be corn's most remarkable talent. It travels widely, then learns the accent of the kitchen. You walk into a market at evening. The air is full of steam, smoke, frying oil, citrus, chili, and rain on pavement. A vendor turns grilled corn over glowing coals. The kernels blister and darken, releasing a sweet smoky scent. Another vendor ladles hominy into bowls. Someone sells blue tortillas wrapped in cloth. Someone else stacks pale arepas. Voices overlap. Coins click. Plastic chairs scrape the ground. The food is ancient and modern at once, which is true of more things than we admit. Then the field returns. You stand again between rows at dusk. The sun lowers, and the leaves shift from green to bronze. Fireflies flicker at the margins. The air cools against your skin. A faint smell of pollen hangs near the tassels. The stalks creak softly as wind moves through them. It is easy here to feel both wonder and unease. Corn has fed civilizations, but it has also fed empires. It has nourished families. But it has also been used inside systems of exploitation. It has supported diversity, then been narrowed into uniformity. It has become sacred, industrial, comforting, political, profitable, and invisible. Maybe that is why the history of corn feels so much larger than a crop. It is a history of human choice. People made maize, and then maize helped make people into farmers, villagers, builders, traders, conquerors, workers, scientists, consumers, and caretakers. It did not force one destiny. It offered possibilities. Some were generous. Some were destructive. Most were tangled together. Because history rarely comes neatly shelled. You hold an ear of corn in your hands. The husk is dry and faintly rough. When you peel it back, the kernels appear in rows, each one catching the last light. They are small, but not simple. Inside them are grasslands and laboratories, terraces and railroads, sacred songs and factory pipes, village hearths and global markets. A single ear carries more history than it has any right to carry. Honestly, very ambitious for a vegetable. Technically a grain. Yes, but let us allow bedtime to be gentle with categories. The night grows softer. The field becomes a dark sea, and the rows lose their sharp edges. The wind moves slowly now, touching the tassels, sliding along the leaves, passing over the soil where roots hold steady in the cooling earth. Somewhere far away, a train carries grain through the dark. Somewhere, a farmer checks the weather one more time. Somewhere, a child eats a warm tortilla, a bowl of porridge, a piece of cornbread, a handful of popcorn, never needing to know the whole long road that brought it there. And you do not need to hold the whole road at once either. Let the story loosen now. Let the fields blur into moonlight. Let the ancient hands, the village fires, the carved stones, the mountain terraces, the ships, the mills, the factories, and the quiet kitchens drift apart like sparks rising from a low fire. Corn rustles softly in the dark, not demanding anything, not explaining itself, just breathing with the night. You feel the earth cool beneath you, steady and kind. The last gold fades from the horizon. The leaves whisper, then soften, then become almost still. And in that calm, you can rest, carried by the gentle thought that history is sometimes held in the smallest things, in seeds, in meals, in the patient green life that rises and returns.